There are a lot of businesses monopolizing Mexican resources. 1/3 of these monopolies should be cut, and these should be given to the people.
Typically it starts, you have a couple of days where your instructor leads discussion and lecture going over the historical background, what's been happening for the past 10, 20, 50 years that lead up to the event, what sorts of different ideologies, factors are at play. Then
you're supposed to read different documents, different books, different speeches.
And everyone gets the same context from that, and then you get an individual role sheet which tells you who you are, if you have any special objectives, and any other background information that maybe you can sneak in during the game.
And it kind of lays out what your goals are, what you have to do to win, what different things you have the ability to do. And then you usually spend a day kind of meeting with people, figuring out where other people's allegiances lie, and then you usually have 4 to 5 days of actual gameplay.
And essentially what happens is your victory objectives are definitely going to come into conflict with another character's victory objectives. And so you have arguments and you have speeches, and at the end of speeches you get questions. And sometimes the questions are going to make you angry because people essentially are trying to tear your speech apart if they're on the opposite faction.
The games are 2 to 3 weeks. So for that 2 to 3 weeks, you are reading and looking up facts and stuff that you have to use because you have to win and you have to prove that you have the best argument.
You are in character, arguing, debating, passing legislation, doing whatever it is you're supposed to be doing. And then usually at the 5th day it comes to some sort of climax.
It's this big conflict in history that has come together in a classroom to kind of create this situation where you get a feeling for how exactly your character was feeling at that time. And because of how the role sheets are set up, they really help you understand and kind of evaluate the situation that you're in.
You know, an army comes in and invades, or you have to try and decide if the government stays together or collapses. Usually someone dies on that last day. And then you have the debrief day where you try and keep track of how many of your victory objectives you got, who wins, who loses, as well as figuring out what actually happened historically.
You have to immerse yourself into it, and you can't really come at it objectively. Like in any other history class that I had, they're always like, we have to see both sides of the argument, but no, in the games, you're looking at your side and that's it. And I think it's really good because you get a better understanding of exactly what was going through these people's minds, what the conflicts were.
My favorite thing is seeing how engaged with the past the students become. There was one time when the outcome of the game went surprisingly against a couple of students. They cried, you know, because they had so much invested in the game. They would not have cried at the end of my lecture, even if I had a great lecture. You know, there would not have been weeping. But they had so much invested in the game. And to me, that means that's just a different level of engagement with the past, where you have an emotional connection to past events.
It's so student-driven that it becomes something that you have to become engaged in for it to work, and you learn so much better when you're the one pushing the lesson and not your instructor sitting at the blackboard with a piece of chalk in his hand.
I try really hard not to play myself, and it's hard because watching my students, it's the, oh, but try this. It's something that I find engaging to watch students do, to see them struggle with these big questions that, you know, societies have struggled with throughout time. And so to see 18, 19, 20-year-olds kind of dealing with some of these huge questions and trying to kind of solve them is really amazing.
I feel like when I'm in the game that I'm partaking in a part of history, which is awesome because normally you can read about history and you can learn about it, but to understand what they're going through during that time period is totally different from reading it from a book. And so if you put yourself into that situation and that dynamic, the whole thing comes to life.
I think one of the things that strikes me is that years after somebody's played a game, they remember the game because they have an emotional learning as opposed to a purely intellectual learning. They have to do the intellectual learning too so that they can play the game, so they understand what's going on and that sort of thing. But they internalize the content in a way that they don't otherwise.
Students get a lot of different skills that are useful for life, not just for class. It's really thinking quickly on your feet, and also being able to talk in front of other people and kind of communicate your ideas and have people sit there and say, I don't buy that, or I don't understand that, and then give you the opportunity to kind of recast what you're trying to say.
I am in my 10th game right now.
I've played, I think I counted, this is my 4th game.
I'm currently in the middle of my 7th reacting to the past game.
There's something about becoming a character in a historical time period or event and having certain objectives that you have to get that I find really interesting.